Hi, everyone. Tim Melvin back again. And we've got something new this week, interesting that we haven't done in a very long time. We're going to interview the CEO of a company that's having a profound influence on some parts of the banking market. Our guest today is Kevin Hart. He runs a company called Green Check Verified that's working with bankers, and it looked to me like primarily community bankers, to develop systems and mechanisms for providing banking services to the cannabis industry. So, Kevin, thanks for spending a little time with us today. And
Course.
what exactly are the problems banks have with doing business with cannabis companies? Because I know it's a big problem.
Well, it's a myriad of things, and it really depends upon how you're actually looking at what the perceived challenge actually might be. But in a strong nutshell, if you will, the biggest problem for financial institutions is how do they know they're letting good money in and keeping bad money out? How do they know that they're working with a compliant cannabis business that is legally operating within the constructs of where they are physically located? And how does an FI know that they can have this relationship with them and then be able to monitor and effectively report and make sure that their examiners understand what they're doing and how to satisfy all the requirements that are placed on them from FinCEN and the guidance around suspicious activity, currency transaction report. So at the end of the day, it becomes a gigantic, in essence, it is a gigantic data problem, a gigantic data puzzle that needs to be able to be solved and scale effectively.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And now, so your company, you've been around since 2018. Is that right? 2017?
2017. I started the idea before that, but we incorporated in 2017.
Okay. And can you break down for us just exactly how the process would work? A banker comes to you and says, hey, we would really like to do business with all these little cannabis companies popping up. What happens then?
Well, it comes down to first off the bank itself, and it could be a credit union. And you mentioned community
Sure.
banks. We have
Sure.
national programs as well. But the financial institution is going to want to be able to identify what that market opportunity is like. They drive by the dispensaries or the other pieces, but what does that really look like? And then we break it down into the account identification, enablement, and onboarding, which is this whole workflow in and
Right.
of itself, because you're talking about high risk businesses, and each state has different rules and requirements for beneficial ownership and insurance coverage, et cetera. And then once you open the account, then the magic really starts to happen, because now the transactions and the commerce is going to
Right.
begin to flow. And so, how do you verify those dollars? And so, we ingest their sales, their inventory, and their financial information, and we verify all that activity that occurs within that cannabis business at the single dollar level, each and every transaction. And then that becomes the visibility to the deposit and the commercial operation for that FI to that particular CRB. Then
Okay.
the mechanics of the money moving back and forth. And then you have to be able to monitor the account in total. It's not just the transaction, but it's the account and the activity within the FI and integrated to the core system. And then regulatory reporting. How do you go through that myriad of the SARS and
Right.
CTR, which that's gone through, as one of the co-founders here likes to say, the bureaucratic meat grinder of rules and regulations. How does that then in turn get scaled and ready for filing? We don't file on your behalf. We enable it because the FI has to run their program.
Right.
And then as you're doing all this, how is your risk, your policies, your procedures, your concentration ratio? Because you have this industry that's scaling at 30, 40, 50% compounded annual growth. You're
Right.
adding more people. How are you managing your entire program? What does your portfolio of cannabis accounts look like? So it's accounts, it's transactions, it's the account monitoring, it's the filing, and it's the portfolio management in totality that has to scale within an FI, in that every department within the FI actually has their role in
Okay.
reviewing and monitoring the program.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, if I'm reading this right, the cannabis dispensaries and companies themselves are also coming to you because I know it's tough for a lot of those guys. I know I've got some friends and associates that own dispensaries, and finding bankers has been tough. Banks just don't want to get involved because of all the rules and regulations. So, they're literally transporting cash by truck. It's become an interesting problem on the Colorado-Kansas border of late.
Hmm.
Um, but finding people to allow them access to credit and debit cards and that type of thing. Are you working with the cannabis companies to kind of match them with banks sometimes?
In that sense, yes. So really, going back to the very beginning, this was always a supply demand problem. And I don't talk about supply chain because it's in the news all the time.
Right.
I'm a supply chain nerd. I'm a supply chain geek.
Okay.
Prior technology companies that I've run have global supply chain, order management, logistics, direct underpinnings associated with it, and that really became part of the foundation of Green Check. How do you take the supply chain of commerce and overlay that, financial services, and overlay that to the supply chain of the plant? And as those touch points go through, how are you verifying that activity and then enabling the financial implementation? So the supply demand problem always has been, to your point, and your friends, unfortunately, in the cannabis industry at large, who are those FIs that are willing to bank the cannabis businesses and do it fairly too?
Right.
That's another
I,
challenge.
I do remember in the early days the fees were rather high
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
banks that would take it.
yes.
So
And so, we've been working on building that whole infrastructure and cadre of FI partners. So we're a little over 100 different unique financial institutions spread throughout the U.S. that are serving the cannabis industries today. And there's 2,000 plus cannabis businesses connected to them, and they're all scaling their programs, and they have a happy symbiotic relationship, and that's moving all along. One of the things that we're doing is in 2022 is because we have this supply and you still have an exceptional amount of demand. We're
mhm,
flipping the model on its head, as it were, not
right.
operationally, because that community bank, that community financial institution support to that credit union. But now what we're doing is we're enabling the CRBs through the platform because they all use the same platform. They have that direct relationship,
Right.
and we've always been 100% and always will be 100% free for the cannabis businesses. Okay.
Okay.
We removed that friction of barrier. But now cannabis businesses will be able to come onto the Green Check platform and opt in and to look for a banking partner, a lending partner, payroll partner,
Mhm.
insurance partner, wealth management. We have created an entire marketplace that's going to allow the CRBs to be able to select and connect to FI, direct bank, neobank, third
Right.
party, curated third party vendors on the other end.
Okay. Now, there's legislation, of course, lots of legislation related to cannabis in front of Congress. But first, I want to touch on the SAFE Act, which they tried to put through as part of one of the earlier spending bills. It was
Mm-hmm.
going to create a framework for make it easier for banks to do business with the cannabis industry. If that ever passes, does it change the nature of your business?
It does, in that it's a very positive event.
Okay.
And so, the Safe Banking Act is, in and of itself, and it will pass at some point. It's not going to happen in 2022. I'm willing to take bets, and I'm cynical on 2023 too, but uh,
Okay.
certainly on 2022, and we can have a whole long conversation on that if you want to. But um, what's going to happen is you have the cannabis industry that we're talking about today, and all these states programs that are running through, and that addressable market. You still have the whole illicit market, which is still
Still
out there
there.
and quite
It's
strong.
huge.
It's
Yeah.
and it's probably 5x the legal market. So
Yes.
the Safe Banking Act comes, the Treasury Department, under no set of circumstances ever, is just going to go, okay, bank,
Yeah, we're
everybody
done.
go. They're going to say, all right, you still have to keep all this illicit money out. So back to the beginning, right?
Right.
How does an FI know that this is good money and the bad money staying out? And Washington, God love them, they're never gonna make something simpler. There's gonna be
No.
more rules and regulations.
Right.
And because we have our compliance rules engine and we're dealing with every transaction at that detail level, we've already migrated through this problem, as it were, in different states, medical to mixed use with adult, et cetera, different products, different methods of payments, different rules and regulations. So the Safe Banking Act is just going to be another layer, okay, on top of it. And further, the federal government is going to overlay the excise tax on this, okay?
Right.
They're going to do that. And time again, and we've gone through this model, okay? You look at what happened when states went from medical to adult and they added
Mhm.
the tax to it. All of a sudden you see that illicit activity, the adult population, the medical
Mhm.
population, jumping up and down because it becomes a commodity purchase. And people are going to
Sure.
vote with their wallets. They're going to buy with their wallets. And so that creates an interesting set of circumstances. For us, it's going to be an exceptionally positive event.
Well, it does sound to me like you'd have an early adopter advantage. You're
Well,
right. You're already out there working with the banks.
we already out there working at the banks, but I mean, anytime you're looking at technology or something new from a program, and again, I've done this more than a few times. I always break things out into there's three things that you should really pay attention to, and those are differentiation, relevance, and sustainability. This isn't about features and functions. This is about what are the things that you're enabling the financial institutions to do that's different. How is that relevant? And what does that mean to them back to the price point, et cetera? Since we've launched, we've changed our pricing twice downwards, and we
Mhm.
rolled it back to every financial institution voluntarily. Okay.
Okay.
And that's why we make it free to the cannabis industry. But what really matters in terms of any sort of program relationship is the sustainability. So when Safe Banking Act comes, what do you have to do to keep your program alive and running? If you want to try to re-engineer that and you have a manual program or a program that's not looking at those form and factors, good luck.
It sounds
With
like it.
also with Safe Banking Act, and this is going to come, okay, and this is where people have to take their blinders off and really look at this, farther downfield, especially with first mover advantage and the opportunity that they're creating in these relationships is you're going to have interstate and international commerce. It's going to
Right.
come, and it's going to come really fast. And so in today's world, the rules and regulations in the supply chain of the plant, in the supply chain of the commerce, you don't have to account for interstate. You're going to have to very soon. And then you're going to have to account for international. So anybody who's not doing it with that longer term vision of sustainability, keep your program alive as long as you can, but get ready to wind it down.
Okay. All right. Listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but I really do appreciate it. But just before we go, you're thinking safe banking maybe after 2023. What about full legalization or at least taking it off Schedule One and allowing the states to decide their cannabis policy for themselves? How long till you see the federal government doing that?
Well, states can do that today, and in the state of Connecticut, for example, they took it off of Schedule One drug, when they started their program, and they made it Schedule Two. And Washington said, "You guys can't do that," and they said, "Well, show us where we can't," and we did. And they did the PMP. But see, that's a double-edged sword in the cannabis industry. Be careful what you wish for because Schedule Two drug while you're not under that spotlight of heroin and cocaine,
Right.
et cetera, you're now under a much set of stricter rules and guidelines in terms of what you have to do for product product origin, product testing, et cetera. And every program's a little bit differently. You overlay that at that top level, that's gonna get different, and you're gonna also start having to deal with a lot more prices in and around the product. Here comes the black market again. So it's this complex
Right.
data puzzle. And then the other piece associated with that is again just the commoditization of the plant and the fact that in like we were doing this interesting study on indirect markets, and so the yield of an acre of hemp in Connecticut is $2,500, 2,500 pounds, and an acre in California we were looking at was 1,300 pounds. Okay, so that difference in that price point, and again that commoditization and the supply chain, those data pieces are all going to come into play in the pricing and the movement of the product and where it goes.
Okay. All right. Listen, I really don't want to take any more of your time tonight. It's fascinating company that you founded and working with banks, and I think you're right. I think safe banking could provide an explosive opportunity for you guys going down the road. So we're going to keep an eye on what's going on at Green Check Verified, Kevin. And hopefully we'll be able to have the same interview next year in Arizona this time.
Let's go. If not
Okay.
sooner, Tim, I'm always available anytime you want to chat.
Okay, I really appreciate it. And guys, thanks for watching again today. We've been talking with Kevin Hart, the CEO of Green Check Verified, a company that's working to help banks do business with the cannabis companies. The smaller banks, we've had some in the portfolio, guys, that have done business with cannabis companies, and it's a fantastic corner of the banking business. So hopefully, Kevin and his company can get more and more banks involved very profitably, and that will make us even more money. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you again probably on Friday.